I do host this show here on Saturdays, sometimes on Sundays, but usually every weekend here on Sirius XM. During the week, I host the morning show on TSN Radio in Montreal. And what that means is that I wake up super early. I wake up at about 4 a.m. every day to go to work. And so I got to go to bed usually by about 10:30. And that means 7 o'clock starts are great, 7:30 starts are okay, and 8 o'clock starts begin to be a little bit of an issue for me. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend that I watched the West Coast games in the first round, and it doesn't seem like I missed all that much. But this year it's happened a couple of times where I found myself sort of saying, I think I'll just go to bed. This game is so one-sided that I think maybe I'm just going to pack it in. I don't really need to watch it now. I did screw up once. I did that during one of the Washington-Columbus games where Columbus did manage to come back and actually ended up winning the game. But for the most part, I've played it pretty well. But it's been an underwhelming first round of the playoffs, hasn't it?
I do. I agree with you. And I remember that very game because I tweeted that these teams have no respect for sleep goals. Like, they don't care. But other than that, other than teams tying and going into overtime, it really hasn't been very competitive, I would say. The New Jersey-Tampa series has been a lot closer than I expected, but a lot of the other series have been a lot more one-sided than I expected. Like, I did not expect a Vegas sweep or even a San Jose sweep. I thought those games would be a bit closer, more exciting, a bit tighter. I will say that I fell asleep like in the middle of those games for the most part because, like you, I have to wake up early.
Like me, get out of here, please.
Not as early as you.
Like me, you have.
I do have to
what
wake up
time do you have to wake
I wake up at 5.
Why do you wake up at 5?
Because I try to get a workout in before I go to work now.
Wow.
I know.
5.
It's crazy. Yes.
Why would you do that?
To get ready and
why
like, you
would
know,
anybody
to like work out
who
and
doesn't have to do that? I don't understand. I'm telling you, I'm not going to do this for my whole life. There's no way. It's taken years off my life doing this for 2.5 years. I really believe that. I think every year you do it, it takes a year off your life, waking up at 4 a.m. every day. There's no way I'm going to keep doing that after. I will never by choice wake up at that time. That's ungodly. Why would you do that to yourself?
Because I'm not rich and I have to go to work for 9.
It's incomprehensible. 9 o'clock. Yes. 7 o'clock is a normal time to wake up. You know what? Even 6 is perfectly fine. 5 is extremely early and 4 is like cruel and unusual.
It's still dark usually.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's, and then the winter time, forget about it. I mean, it doesn't get nice out until much later in the day. But anyway, last night was pretty good. Well, 2 of the games were pretty good. The Jets just took care of the Wild. I think we sort of saw the writing on the wall there. And the Wild, those are tough injuries, starting with Ryan Suter and then to lose Zach Parise, who was playing his best hockey in recent memory and scoring seemingly every game. That was tough. And a tough way for the Wild to go out. Once again, another playoff disappointment for the Minnesota Wild, another playoff disappointment for a Bruce Boudreau team. But the Avalanche Predators game was pretty good last night. A little bit of a lengthy review that seemed a little bit unnecessary. Oh, was there a kicking motion? No, there was no kicking motion.
Off his leg.
Why was there any debate about this? It just seems like so much time is devoted to these reviews. We've got to make sure we get it right. Anybody who watched that one replay in real time saw there was no kicking motion. Why did that take 5 minutes last night? Anyway, I wanted to go through some of the series, actually all of the series, and we're going to do a forensic analysis of whether this first round actually has been bad and whether it has been underwhelming. Starting with Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. Now, the Flyers got a huge win there yesterday. The series has been a bit one-sided, I think, and this is true in both respects. So game 1 was super one-sided with Pittsburgh won 7-0. And then the Flyers came back. They smoked the Penguins in game 2, and then the Penguins all over them in game 3. And now here we are. We're going to have a game 6. That'll be going down tomorrow. And one thing that struck me about the series so far has been Sidney Crosby and the fact that he clearly does not try during the regular season anymore. He doesn't. There's no regular season Crosby, and I truly believe that he's figured this out. The Penguins figured this out too. Think about the Penguins season, right? First 30 games, they were bad. They were like 500, and people are like, oh boy, the fatigue is catching up. Maybe the Penguins are going to miss the playoffs. And then all of a sudden they flipped a switch and they were good again, and then ended up competing for the division and falling short in the end. But I think that the Penguins and Crosby has figured this out. And Malkin, I think, was sort of beast moding it during the regular season. That Crosby has realized that he needs to, especially as he gets older, keep it in cruise control for the regular season, and then when the playoffs come around, he just flips a switch and finds that next level. He puts it into overdrive. And that's what we've seen so far in the postseason. Beast mode Sidney Crosby. Meanwhile, that Sean Couturier injury that he suffered in practice running into Radko Gudas, of all people, was pretty gruesome. But hey, I mean, give the guy credit. He didn't look like himself. He didn't look like he could skate like we know that he can skate, but he scored a massive goal and had a huge return there for the Flyers yesterday. And I got to say, just a quick anecdote, that I was talking to an NHL player earlier this week and I asked him about this Couturier Radko Gudas collision, and he said to me, use the K word to describe his reaction. The K word being karma. That it was Couturier was taken out by Radko Gudas, a guy with a lengthy reputation for cheap shots. That apparently this guy is a Buddhist, because he did use the term karma to describe what happened. I'm not sure if I believe that, but I do think that might be
So let me get this straight. So he means it's karma because Radko's usually hitting other players, and so he's disadvantaging his own team with one of his hits. Is that what he's meaning?
Yeah.
Like, okay. Because I was like, is there something?
Follow the logic?
No, it's just I thought maybe Couturier did something bad and then is getting hit.
Nothing to do with Couturier.
Okay, right.
Couturier would just be sort of the innocent bystander in this situation, and it's super unfortunate. But I don't think that the guy that I'm talking about would be the only person who feels that way. And anybody who's been on the receiving end of a Radko Gudas cheap shot might relate at least a little bit to that. But no, super unfortunate for Couturier, who by all accounts a good kid. A guy that I covered a little bit back in his days in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, playing out there in Drummondville. But he's turned in a really impressive season and a great playoff so far. So anyway, still though, that series, I guess I just thought it was going to be more competitive. None of the games. I want nail biters, I guess, is the thing. I'm not cheering for any of these teams. It doesn't matter to me really who wins. I just want the hockey to be good, and maybe more importantly, I want it to be exciting. And I don't know if I felt like that series is really delivered in that regard. One series that has is the Washington Columbus series. For me, the best series to date, and some good storylines too. Barry Trotz rolling the dice with Philip Grubauer, coming up snake eyes in that when he made that bet. And the fact that Braden Holtby has come back and redeemed himself for kind of a horrible regular season. So we'll see. As we mentioned, we will have coverage of Game 5 of that series. I love nothing like a Game 5 in a 2-2 series. It's not quite a Game 7, but I love a Game 5 in a 2-2 series. That's coming up at 3 o'clock. But yeah, that's been a great series. Meanwhile, Boston-Toronto, I think the most disappointing series of the first round for me, if only just because I was so excited for this series. I thought we'd have a lot of bad blood. I thought things were going to be physical, and I thought it was going to be really close. And frankly, it hasn't been very close at all. The Boston has just outclassed the Leafs, and it is. You look at the last game, and I thought the Leafs were going to win that game. Watching it when it was 1-1, but Freddie Anderson, first of all, you can't give up that goal at any time, let alone the first minute of a crucial sort of must-win playoff game for your team. But they got it back, and then the Leafs were coming at them. But to give Tuukka Rask all the credit in the world, this is a guy who's criticized so heavily by so many people in that market in Boston. There's a lot of people who still don't buy what Tuukka Rask is selling. That was a fantastic performance. He kept that game 1-1 long enough for Brad Marchand to finally score there. And again, I'm not going to blame Frederik Andersen for a goal that scored on a 2-on-1, but I don't know what Freddie Anderson's doing in that situation. If you watch that 2-on-1 where Pasternak is sweeping in the side, Anderson he's got to be 12 feet out of his net to cut it off, and the defenseman presumably is going to try to limit the guy's opportunities to shoot. But it was as if he just thought there was no chance. And I know Pasternak looked him off. Pasternak did it. It was a no-look pass. It was like a Magic Johnson no-look pass from Pasternak, but just a strange sort of performance, I thought, from Frederik Andersen. Not convinced that he can take a team to the promised land. I know a lot of people disagree, but going back to his days in Anaheim, I thought he cost the Ducks on more than one occasion when they had teams that might have been good enough to win the Stanley Cup. And now here we are again. The other story with the Leafs, Matthews and Nylander, and the story is that they've been bad. They've been absent. Tampa, New Jersey, meh. You know, that's at 3 o'clock today for whatever reason. Again, we have 2 games at the exact same time. Why this happens, I have no idea. Why would you have 2 games at 3 and then another game at 8? This happened last weekend.
Exactly.
Why not have one game at 3, or better yet, how about this? 1 game at 2, 1 game at 5, and 1 game at 8. This makes all the sense in the world. But really, is there any question for you, as if you are a casual viewer, which game you're going to be watching at 3 o'clock? You got to watch Blue Jackets Capitals now. Just something about that Devils Lightning series just doesn't do it for me. In my notes here, I wrote the word meh to describe it. MEH.
I've actually been enjoying it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying, though. I think often when I am watching it, it's because of what's on, like, opposite that game.
Right.
But no, I have enjoyed it. I thought it has been a lot closer than I expected, for sure.
Taylor Hall's unbelievable.
Yes.
But that's the simple thing seems to be, stop Taylor Hall, you'll stop the Devils. So we'll see. Nashville, Colorado, I think has been good. That was a really good game last night. And that's a series I haven't watched as much of as I wish I could have, just because of the time restrictions. But big game last night, a lot of fun. Andrew Hammond, the Hamburglar, he's back. I don't know. I'm not to count my chickens on that one here.
He's doing his thing where he steals a game. Everybody thinks he's amazing.
He was good. He was good in that
really
game.
Good last night.
But he was he seemed to be in a zone where he was almost, the puck was almost magnetically drawn to him. He was making saves that it looked like he had no business making, but he did make them. Winnipeg, Minnesota. I think the injuries to Minnesota really were a factor and cost us what could have been a much better series. But congrats to Winnipeg and the fans in that market, the terrific fan base there in Winnipeg. What a great story. And now they can sit back. They have the luxury of sitting back and watching the Preds and Avalanche go tomorrow night and see if Nashville can finish off Colorado. If not, they're going to be loving it, because that is going to be, if in fact we get that Winnipeg-Nashville series in the second round, is going to be a highly physical affair. I can't talk about Anaheim, San Jose, because I literally did not watch any of it. Again, I can't watch those games because they start so late. But I love that Evander Kane's been a factor. I still can't believe how little San Jose had to give up to get that guy. And Vegas, LA. Wow. What a crazy story that the Vegas Golden Knights keep doing it. Here's my new scenario that I came up with for what's going to happen with Vegas. Now, I picked Winnipeg to win the Stanley Cup before the playoffs, but I'm looking at Vegas, and here's how it's going to go down, okay? Hear me out. They're going to win. They're going to beat San Jose the next round, obviously, because why wouldn't they? Because they're the best. They beat everybody. Right? I don't know if they're ever going to lose a game again, although they do need to score more than 7 goals if they're going to beat the Sharks in the next round. So let's just say they beat San Jose. Meanwhile, Winnipeg and Nashville face each other in the other game, in the other series. They go the distance. They beat the crap out of each other, and whoever is left standing will face Vegas. Vegas will be refreshed again because they don't lose hockey games, and they will be able to take on the scrap heap, the injury-riddled whoever, whether it's Winnipeg or Nashville. They knock them off. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Penguins continue to do what they do on the other side of the bracket, and Matt Murray takes them to the promised land, to the Stanley Cup final. Penguins versus Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup final. Marc-Andre Fleury versus Matt Murray, and of course, Fleury beats the Penguins, and Matt Murray loses a playoff series for the first time in his career to Marc-Andre Fleury, of all people. What do you say?
I like it. It's a beautiful scenario. I really hope it does play out.
Can you imagine if Vegas wins the Stanley Cup? The fact that right now, if you look at go to the odds makers, go to Bovada or whatever,
Vegas has the best shot.
They've got the highest Stanley Cup odds right now. Crazy story. Really is just one of the most incredible stories in the history of not just hockey, but of all pro sports. It's fantastic. So anyway, congrats to all you Vegas, you long-suffering Vegas Golden Knights fans. Can you imagine if you're a fan of, let's say you were a fan of Winnipeg before yesterday, hadn't won a playoff series in 31 years. And Vegas already has a division title, a 107-point season, a first-round sweep of a team that won the Stanley Cup just 3 years ago. Just a totally crazy story. And, the fans are loving it. I'm just saying, expectations can be a funny thing. Don't expect this to happen every year, Vegas fans. This is a magical season that many fans never get to enjoy. So anyway, I hope you're drinking it in. Coming up next, let's talk to Jim Diamond of the Associated Press, covering the Nashville Predators. We'll get into, well, whether the Preds are in trouble now that they've lost a game to Andrew Hammond. Remember when Andrew Hammond ducked out of the way of a PK Subban slap shot in that playoff series a couple years ago? Subban one time's a slap shot. Hammond ducked out of the way. That's when I knew that maybe the magic was going to fade. But now here he is again, beating the Nashville Predators. So we'll talk to Jim about the Preds and whether it's time for them to start worrying. That's coming up next. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM and NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Period. Sven Andrighetto.
Yep, they're still alive. The Colorado Avalanche. Now, if I had told you, let's say 2 weeks ago, that the Colorado Avalanche, was it two? I think it was 2 weeks ago today that they beat. Who did they beat? They beat St. Louis in that basically a playoff game, right, to make the playoffs. Now, if I had told you before, say exactly 2 weeks ago, that in Game 5 of a Colorado-Nashville playoff series, Andrew Hammond and Sven Andrighetto were going to be the heroes, what would you have said? You wouldn't have believed me. No way. But here we are, and we've got ourselves a series. The Hamburglar is alive and well. The Avs forced Game 6, beating the Preds 2-1. Kind of a shocking result that I'm sure took the air out of the building there in Smashville. And the rivalry is alive and well between these two teams. So with more on that story, covering the Nashville Predators and has done for years for the Associated Press. You can read his work with the Rinkside Report as well. It's Jim Diamond. Jim, welcome back.
Connor, it's great to be here. I hope you are well.
I am. And that was quite a game last night, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was something. You look at the shot totals and you think the Predators just dominated the game, and it really didn't look like that. Just from the press box, a lot of the shots the Predators had were from outside with no traffic, and the Hamburglar just kind of came out of the mothballs and really took over that game. So it was something. And that dude from the Colorado radio, I believe it was pretty close to where we were. So he was almost screaming in our ear, in the press box.
Right.
In the final last year, the guy from Finland that got all the pub for his calls, he was right behind us too. So I just get screamers right behind me every single big playoff game, it seems like.
Well, the Colorado guys are notorious to on Altitude Network for like being the biggest homers, and I mean, there's a lot of competition there. But whenever I play a clip from that network, I'll usually do a disclaimer ahead of time. Just be forewarned. Your speakers may be about to get blown out. Although the guy who's the worst is Dave Mishkin, who calls Tampa Bay Lightning games. Anyway, here we are, and the Avs are down in the series. So the Preds up 3-2. Is it time to start worrying at all for the Preds?
I mean, I think it's past that time because even despite going into last night's game up 3-1, they haven't played great in the series. I mean, they, you mentioned some of the players that have kind of become factors. Sven Andrighetto and the Hamburglar. Kind of just on name recognition alone, the Predators should have been done with the series, very early, and they struggled in the games they won, and the ones that they've lost haven't been great either. So, they had a good third period last night. They just kind of came out on the wrong end of that score. But yeah, I don't know if it's looking ahead to now that for sure it would be Winnipeg in the second round or what the situation is. But they're not playing well.
Is it possible that they peaked too early?
It could be. I mean, it seems like almost the last couple of months of the season, it was almost a foregone conclusion that they're going to win the Central and probably the West and maybe the President's Trophy, and all of those things happened. And they were giving guys nights off for maintenance and everything. And I don't know if they just kind of lost what was special. I mean, if you kind of look, it took them pretty close to the end of the season to clinch all those things because Winnipeg was so hard charging and hitting their stride. Almost at the right time, and they obviously carry that momentum through in their first round matchup. So I think there is something to that.
And I guess the other thing is what and I hear you describing it there, Jim, is the fact that they haven't really had to play with much urgency for quite a while. Colorado has. They've been fighting for their lives for months, right? So this is nothing new to them, but it can be a difficult thing, can it, to just all of a sudden get into that sort of do or die mode?
I think so. And if you just look back to the Predators from a year ago, they were the last team into the playoffs and, basically playing playoff games the last month of the season and carry that right on through to the Stanley Cup final. So I agree. I think there's a lot to playing meaningful games down the stretch of the season as opposed to, just kind of almost being on cruise control, assuming that you're going to be there. And, Andrew Ghetto said it after the game. He said, once you get in the playoffs, it doesn't matter where you finished in the regular season. Everybody's, got the same record. So yeah, they're coming in with all kinds of momentum and they're, still down a game, but, they're going back home with a chance to even this up tomorrow night.
And I think it's interesting what you say about home ice, because entering yesterday's games, it was 17-15, I believe, the record of home teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So what is it now? 18-17 after yesterday's game. It does seem like home ice advantage doesn't mean as much as it used to, doesn't it?
No, again, if you look back to last year, the Predators, obviously, not having home ice in any of the series had to win some games on the road, and they did that. So. Yeah, I've always been kind of a believer that matchups are a little overblown in last change, but yeah, you're right. I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, but last year I think it was similar. It was almost 500 home and road teams when you looked at the league overall.
And so here we are. It's a 3-2 series lead. They still do have the lead, but it is one of those things where. Everybody's been talking about this Winnipeg-Nashville second round matchup and how excited they are for it, but well, the Jets are now there after last night, but and they did what the Preds couldn't do in Game 5, although they almost did. And now they get to sort of sit back and watch and see what happens here, and wait for whomever is going to come out of that series. So it's going to be fascinating to see. It's tomorrow, a 7:00 Eastern time start between the Preds and the Avalanche in a Game 6, a crucial Game 6 from Denver. And we'll see how this thing plays out. Meanwhile, who do they need more from, Jim? If you could single out, is there anyone in particular who was expected to give them more, or should be, or could be giving them more?
I don't know if it's one. Their Predators have scored 0 goals from the defensemen in this series, and the whole story of the Predators since their beginning is good goaltending and production from their defense. Now that they have a good number of highly skilled forwards who score goals, it's not as big a thing. But you just look at the guys. Josi, Ellis, Ekholm, Subban, 0 goals. You're going to need one of them to step up and score a goal or two here or there. They have continued to create offense from the back end, with assists and driving the puck up ice. But it's a little surprising to be 5 games in and see 0 goals for that group of 4 who are likely the best combination of 4 defensemen on one team in the league.
And that's it. I guess you come to expect a certain level of offensive contributions from the D when they're doing it all year long, and then now they could use it in maybe we'll see a big they do have a big game guy there in number 76, and well, there's still time. I think they're going to be fine personally, but sometimes you need a little bit of a scare in the first round, and that is certainly something that they're getting from the Colorado Avalanche. Meanwhile, PK Subban nominated for the Norris Trophy the other day, Jim, and there are those here in Montreal, a lot of crazy people here who are still sort of trying to claim that the Canadians got the better of the Subban-Weber trade, despite all evidence to the contrary. And one of the things you hear from
one of them Mark Bergevin, or
yeah, possibly, and maybe I'm not sure if he has a few Twitter accounts that he runs on the side, but like. What would you say? And this is one of the things I hear from these people is that Subban's not even the best defenseman on his own team. What do you say to that?
He may be, but the good thing about if you're Nashville, he doesn't have to be. He has 3 other all world defensemen playing with him, so he doesn't have to play 32, 35 minutes a night like a Ryan Suter in Minnesota does. So is he the best defenseman on the Predators? I think so, but it's probably pretty close. Roman Josi had a pretty good charge, maybe even for a North nomination late in the season. And people forget Ryan Ellis missed the first 3 months of the season with an injury that he sustained in the final last year. So PK was just absolutely phenomenal over the first 3 months of this season. So I think he's the best defenseman on the Predators, but like I said, to their credit and to their benefit, he's got others that are really close if there was a race like that.
Yeah, and it's a nice thing to have, that's for sure. And Matthias Ekholm is no slouch either. I guess the thing is that there's a few things that I look at, but a lot of it is deployment. If Sidney Crosby is if PK Subban is given the Sidney Crosby assignment, if PK Subban is being given the Nathan McKinnon assignment, I think that this guy's a pretty damn good shutdown defenseman, and perhaps maybe it's just because he's got the reputation for being an offensive guy who skates as well as he does. But I mean, this is a guy who is underrated as a shutdown guy, isn't he?
Absolutely, and I think that kind of came to light last year in their playoff run, and especially in the final when he was drawing those assignments, and people were asking about him, and he was almost incredulous, like, "Yeah, I can play defense too. I'm not just an offensive guy," but he played played physically and he was relied on in big situations and given minutes, and I think he really not that people needed eye opening to him, but he just absolutely just destroyed it last year in the playoffs.
Jim, thank you for your time as usual. We really appreciate it, man.
All right, anytime, my friend.
That is Jim Diamond, Associated Press, covering the Nashville Predators. The Preds play Game 6 in Denver tomorrow night. They're up 3-2 in their series. So what do we have coming up next? How about we take a deep dive into how the Vegas Golden Knights got to be the juggernaut that they are right now? How did they get there? Who is to blame for this? We'll talk to Adam Gretz. He did a deep dive on that himself, and really just a terrific read, especially if you, like me, think maybe being an NHL general manager isn't actually as hard as everybody seems to think that it is. I'll explain more next. Adam Gretz of the NHL on NBC Sports joins us next. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
Out they come on the left side, shoved forward. Here's Carlson, left wing. Through the circle, drop pass Smith to the back door. They score! Knights take a 1-0 lead. Brandon McNabb from the right side scores against his old club. What a setup on the rush for Vegas. And the defenseman scores his first playoff goal. Vegas on top 1-0.
And that was all they needed. In almost every game, that was all they needed. Geez, the LA Kings scored 3 goals and lost to the Vegas Golden Knights, the expansion team, who scored only 7 goals, but yet managed to sweep their opponent in the first round. Very impressive stuff. What's Marc-Andre Fleury? He's got like a .977 save percentage. Not too shabby. I don't know what's most amazing about this Vegas Golden Knights story. A part of it has to be the goaltending. Remember at the beginning of the season when they went to like their 4th string goaltender at one point? They just kept winning games, and well, now here they are. They were the first team through to the second round. They're going to play the San Jose Sharks, and they just get to sit back and watch the other teams beat the crap out of each other for the next couple of days and until the second round begins. How did this happen? Let's talk to Adam Gretz about this. Adam wrote about it for the NHL on NBC Sports. The headline, "Don't blame expansion draft rules for Vegas's success. Blame your general manager." Adam, good afternoon.
How you doing today, Connor?
I'm doing great. And you know what? I love this this thing that you wrote. I saw your tweet the other day sort of about this, and I've been man, I've been beating the drum on this for a while, and people think I'm crazy, but I think that being an NHL general manager is not as hard as people think. I understand being a coach, super difficult. I don't think I could ever do that, but I think that you or I could probably be a serviceable NHL general manager. Am I crazy to think that? What do you think?
Looking around the NHL at some of the stuff that gets done, I don't think it's a crazy thought because there's so many moves that get made that the minute they get made, you just think, what are they doing? Like, why are you doing that? And, I look at Chicago trading Artemi Panarin. I look at Edmonton trading Taylor Hall. And those are moves that the minute they got made, you just question what's the benefit there. And when you look at what these guys did with the expansion draft, everybody just freaked out. Everybody was going to lose one player, and everybody was so concerned about who that one player was going to be. They ended up giving away 2 or 3 players or multiple draft picks, high draft picks. Like, not just, they got 3 first-round draft picks because teams didn't want to give up their number 5 defenseman or whatever. It's just everybody lost their minds, and they helped put together a Stanley Cup contender from scratch. I know the expansion draft rules were more favorable than some of the previous ones in terms of who got protected and who you had to make available, but they still shouldn't have been this good this fast.
And so you go into a couple of examples in your piece, but you start with the St. Louis Blues here. Why did they protect Ryan Reeves? I remember at the time, like, why did they Ryan Reeves? What? And Vladimir Sobotka protected as well. And David Perron, who's had a 66-point season in just 70 games. That's just to begin with is a hard one to figure out, isn't it?
Yeah, and Perron, he had 50 points last year for the Blues. He's been a very good player throughout his career, like a top 6 guy. And they protected a couple of fourth-liners over him. And the argument I always got back about Ryan Reeves was, well, they had to protect Reeves because they traded him to Pittsburgh and they got a first-round pick. And, okay, that's fine. But, number one, what are the odds that Vegas is going to take Ryan Reeves to ruin that trade? And number two, 2 days after the expansion draft, they traded Yuri Laterra to the Philadelphia Flyers for Braden Shen. And they didn't feel the need to protect Laterra to protect that trade. But Ryan Reeves was on their protected list, and Vladimir Sobotka was on their protected list, but not the guy that had 50 points for you last season. It didn't make any sense.
That's exactly what I was about to say. It still doesn't make any sense. It makes even less sense now than it did then. Minnesota, another example of this. Eric Haula and Alex Tuch have both had monster seasons in Vegas. And as you point out, he's playing his first full NHL season, 21 years old, 15 goals. Eric Haula, another one of these stories, 29 goals he scored this year. And as you write, they had to protect Pominville, but I remember that they left Stahl unprotected, and you're like, what's going on here? And how is it that Vegas is not taking Stahl, who had that terrific season? But if you can, try to explain to me why or what the logic was of Minnesota giving up, trading Alex Tuch, just so the Golden Knights would take Haula, who ended up scoring 29 goals this year.
Yeah, there just seemed to be a lot of stuff going on with Minnesota where they didn't want to lose a defenseman. They didn't want to lose Eric Stahl. They had some guys they had to protect. So instead of losing just one of those guys, they gave away Eric Haula, and they gave away a top prospect to get Vegas to take him. And my criticism of Minnesota here, because Minnesota is one of those teams that was kind of in a tough spot. They were going to lose a good player. But my criticism there was you had Eric Haula all these years, and you buried him on your fourth line. He still scored 15 goals for you every season, playing 12 minutes a night. You traded a first and a second round pick last year to get Martin Hanzal and you play him over Eric Haula. You look at what Haula did this season, and you look at what he did his past couple of seasons for Minnesota on a per minute basis, virtually identical production. The difference is in Vegas, he's getting 6 extra minutes of ice time a night. Why didn't they realize what they had in him? A guy scoring 15 goals for you in fourth-line minutes every year. They didn't play. They seem to go out of their way to not play him. And then they give away a top prospect to give Vegas the opportunity to take him because they didn't want to lose Marco Scandella or whatever. It just bad. You have to know your own players. You have to know what you have. And Minnesota was a team that just didn't seem like they knew what they had, and it ended up burning them in a situation like this.
What about Columbus? How heavily do you think they should be criticized for not knowing what they had in William Karlsson?
See, Columbus is a tough one because I don't think anybody realistically could have seen this coming from William Karlsson. I mean, this is like one of the most unexpected goal-scoring seasons ever. But my criticism there is you gave away Karlsson, you traded a first-round pick, and you look at the players that they were trying to keep Vegas from taking. One of them was a backup goalie that didn't spend the entire season in Columbus. You had Josh Anderson, who they wanted to protect, who's a pretty good player, but I don't think he's so good that you had to give away William Karlsson plus a first-round draft pick to persuade a team not to take him. So, I mean, I think William Karlsson's one of those guys where Vegas kind of caught lightning in a bottle. But I still think Columbus was one of those teams that overreacted just because they gave away so much. And, you know, Vegas had, they have 3 first-round draft picks this season. They have multiple draft picks coming in next season because teams like Columbus didn't want to lose a backup goalie or a good third liner. It just, like I said at the beginning, everybody overreacted.
Right. And finally, the Florida Panthers. Not only did they, and I know they wanted to get rid of the Riley Smith contract, but those are the guys that are Karlsson's running mates, Jonathan Marchessault. That guy was their leading scorer last year. How is it possible to understand what Florida was doing here?
No, I mean, I get wanting to maybe get out from Riley Smith's contract if you're Florida because he was coming off a down year. He's been kind of inconsistent throughout his career, had a lot of money tied up in him. But there had to be a better way to get out of that contract than by giving up literally your leading goal scorer. Guy scored 30 goals for you last season. And that's how you persuade a team to take a contract that isn't even, it's not like Riley Smith's contract was an albatross. It's not like it was something that was tying down the franchise. I mean, what is it, like $5 million a year? I mean, it's for a guy that has 45, 50 points, it's not the worst contract in the world. But it just made no sense. You protect 4 defensemen. You go the 4 forward, 4 defenseman route. 2 of the defensemen are Alex Petrovic and Mark Pysyk. You protect them over Jonathan Marchessault. And you just give away these 2 guys for a 4th-round draft pick. And that's one of those moves from the very beginning that everybody just kind of scratched their head and said, what are they doing? And why are you doing this? And it basically gave Vegas their top line, and it's been one of the best lines in hockey this season. And it just didn't need to happen. Again, just a bunch of those moves that were not necessary, and it made Vegas a contender.
It really is a remarkable story. And now here they are. They're right now the odds-on favorites, according to Vegas, to win the Stanley Cup this year. Just absolutely ridiculous. And the other thing is, and you finish off your piece writing about this, and I urge you to check it out from the NHL and NBC Sports. How did this happen with the Vegas Golden Knights? A great piece by Adam Gretz, who we're talking to right now. It's that they flipped the whole Pacific Division narrative on its head, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you heard, to win in the Pacific, you got to be big and heavy, and you have to be able to withstand the punishment that LA and Anaheim can put on you. And Vegas built a team as the smallest team in the division. I mean, that's not exaggeration. By height and weight, they literally are the smallest team in the division. They hardly have any players among the top 200 in height or weight, and a lot of the guys that are in there barely played for them this season. They're a fast team. They're a skilled team. and they just skated circles around everybody in the division. They not only won the division, they dominated the head-to-head matchups. And even though that series against LA was really close on the scoreboard, you could tell just by watching that series a lot that the Kings just could not keep up with them. And I think you would have seen a very similar thing had they played Anaheim in the second round. It just, they took that whole, like you said, that whole narrative, they just flipped it upside down. And I think they had a clean slate to build a team in any direction they wanted to go. I think they recognized where the league is, where it's going, where it's all about speed now. Everybody wants to be fast and play fast, and skating ability. And they built that team from scratch. And they just showed up on day one and just they took on the big bad boys and they beat them.
It's an amazing thing. I love the piece. Thanks for writing it. Thanks for making time for us here today, Adam. I appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Anytime.
That's Adam Gretz, NHL and NBC Sports. I'm telling you guys, so we think that these guys are a bunch of geniuses. Oh, what a job. You need to have played in the NHL in order to be a general manager. Listen, man, I'm telling you, and I believe this 100% with all my heart, that if I had been hired by the Edmonton Oilers instead of Peter Chiarelli to be their general manager, they would be way better. And in fact, I'll throw this out there, I think they would have made the playoffs this year. I wouldn't have traded Taylor Hall for Adam Larson, tell you that much. Wouldn't have signed Chris Russell to that ridiculous contract, tell you that. Wouldn't have traded Jordan Eberle for Ryan Strome. What were they thinking? How about this one? How about trading? I wouldn't have signed Milan Lucic to that contract. How about trading the draft pick that became Matthew Barzal for Griffin Reinhart, who never played a game for the Edmonton Oilers? Just totally insane, loco stuff going on out there in Edmonton. How did these guys hang on to their jobs? Chiarelli, Garth Snow, what the heck is going on Long Island? Ken Holland, really? Ken Holland, what does this guy have to do? I think of George Costanza. Remember when he was trying to get fired by the Yankees? He's driving around the parking lot with the World Series trophy, dragging it behind his car, trying to get Steinbrenner to fire him, and then Wilhelm ends up getting the job with the Mets. This is what I wonder is sometimes it's just like, to what extent, how far into the ground does a team have to be run before you say, maybe this guy's not doing a good job? I don't know. Coming up next, let's take a deep dive into the Norris Trophy nominees. Who was snubbed, and did the guys nominated deserve to be nominated? We will get into that next. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com.
29. Drew Doughty at the line. One of the favorites for the Norris Trophy. Doughty, score! Doughty's shot hit a body in front, and the Kings have the early lead.
Those are your Norris Trophy nominees: Victor Hedman, PK Subban, Drew Doughty. Any surprises there? Well, it's PK Subban, and you know how a lot of people feel about him. So, yes, there are people who think that PK Subban did not deserve to be nominated for the Norris Trophy. PK Subban is not even the best defenseman on his own team. He's not good defensively. These are narratives that are false and demonstrably so. As we mentioned earlier in this hour, why do you think that the Pittsburgh Penguins, why do you think the Nashville Predators in the Stanley Cup final last year put Subban on Sidney Crosby? Remember Crosby punching Subban in the back of the head on top of him behind the net, just pounding his head in, right? So upset. That's what Subban does to guys. And that's why he gets the Crosby assignment, because he's an elite shutdown defender. Did you see him do the forearm shiver to Nathan MacKinnon in the Colorado-Nashville series this year? That's because he's on Nathan MacKinnon, a guy who's in the Hart Trophy conversation. He is the guy who tends to get the most difficult matchup to go up against the other team's best player. And, that's it on a President's Trophy winning team. It seems to be going pretty well overall. 59 points, 16 goals. And here's a stat for you about PK Subban. You know what zone starts are, right?
1 minute.
Defensive zone starts. PK Subban starts 57.5% of his shifts in the defensive zone. Why? Because his coach trusts him to take on those difficult defensive situations. For comparison's sake, Victor Hedman, 45.9% of shifts in the defensive zone, which is a much more sheltered way of using a guy. And Doughty is at 48.7%. So 9% or 12% higher than those guys. PK
30.
Subban, not only is he the best defenseman on his team, he deserves certainly to be nominated for the Norris Trophy, which he will not win. Let's not forget, he also dragged Alexei Emelin around as his partner for half the season.
15.
How many guys would be criticized for being nominated for an award they already won? Only PK Subban, I think. Let's talk Lightning and Hedman with Brian Burns of TampaBayLightning.com. That's coming up next on Hockey Primetime.
Perfect.
with the cross face knee, handled by Malone, right point, right corner Kucherov. Left circle, Stamkos, shoot, score!
Hall comes to the near side. Out in the corner, looks around, out high. Palmieri with a shot, blocked away by Vasilevsky. Loose puck, Hall with a score! Taylor Hall has tied it up at once.
Yes, Taylor Hall getting the job done as much as he can, but guy needs some help. The New Jersey Devils may be in some trouble, and we are getting closer to game time, about an hour from now. And, one to look forward to. Why is there two games at the exact same time? I have no idea. I can't pretend to understand why the NHL would do this. Why not just look at the most successful pro sports league, the National Football League? Do they ever play two playoff games at the same time? No. Just stagger the start times. Why wouldn't you stagger the start times? I implore you, and I know Gary Bettman's a big fan of the show. Gary, if you are listening, and I know you are, he always is, stagger the start times, man, so we can watch all the games. I don't want to have to pick and choose. I understand on weeknights, you got to do what you got to do. But even then, don't start them both at 7. Start one at 7, one at 7:30, and one at 8. It's not that difficult, right? Our next guest joins us from TampaBayLightning.com, covering the Lightning, who are in the driver's seat right now, leading the New Jersey Devils by a score of 3-1 in their best-of-7 series. They got to win this one. Well, they don't have to win this one. They'd like to. The Devils have to win this one. Should be a fun one later on today. Bryan Burns is on the line. Hello, Bryan.
Hey.
Sorry, are you there? I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're having a little trouble with the connection. You're sort of cutting in and out.
I'll call him back on a different line.
So we'll see if we can get that straightened out. But the thing with the Lightning, and look, good for them, right? We talked about what Nashville did, and the Lightning and the Preds were kind of the two best teams in the NHL for most of the season, right? Remember, the Lightning just came flying out of the gate, and were so good. But I think the thing that you worry about in that situation can be whether complacency will set in, and if all of a sudden you're going to start when the games really start to matter in the playoffs, if you are going to have that level of urgency. And I think we're seeing it from Nashville that I don't know if they have it. They're going up against a team in Colorado that they've been fighting for their lives for the last 6 weeks, right? Every game was a playoff game for them. The Preds kind of coasted their way into the playoffs. And I wonder if there's something similar going on with the Tampa Bay Lightning, only the thing is they're winning, and they're getting the job done against a New Jersey Devils team that they were supposed to beat, right? We know in the case of both of these matchups that Colorado was a lot of people didn't think they'd win a game against Nashville. And I think when it comes to the Devils, and nobody gave them much of a chance either. And I think with good reason. But yet here we are. So we'll see. But I don't know. Has Tampa really been? You've been watching this series.
Yeah.
Have you been impressed with the Lightning? Like, do you feel like they're playing that dominant hockey that we saw from them earlier this year?
No, and I agree with you on both teams, Nashville and Tampa. And I think it's incredibly interesting that both of them for the next
Brian's
round
on the line.
are going to be playing the best teams. You know, like the best possible team after them, to be honest, and it's going to be really interesting to see if they turn it back up or not.
And we'll see if they do get through today, and then later on tonight, if Boston's able to do the job, then I think we're going to get a really good series between the Bruins and the Lightning. But both teams do have to get there first. All right, let's talk Tampa Bay Lightning. Bryan Burns is on the line from TampaBayLightning.com. Hello, Bryan.
Hey, Connor, what's going on? Hope you can hear me a little better this time.
Oh, yeah. Wow. No, crystal clear, loud and clear. Very impressive stuff. All right. So, sorry, Bryan. Do you have the Lightning hit their stride? Like, are they playing their best hockey yet?
Yeah, I think they're getting there. I think they're definitely playing similar to how they were playing earlier in this season when they had such a hot start to the NHL season. And I think they just got off to such a good start that towards the middle of the year, especially around the All-Star break, they had a late January and February where they were on the road quite a bit. And I think they just, we're playing mediocre hockey for their standards and really didn't look like they were engaged until the season wound down to maybe the last week to 2 weeks of the regular season. And I think that last home game against Boston really kind of woke them up and was one of their best efforts when they defeated the Bruins 4-0 at Amalie Arena. And they've kind of carried that same way and same style of playing into the playoffs here. And we've seen kind of that similar team through the first 4 games of this New Jersey series.
And we will see Game 5. It's a 3:00 start at Amalie Arena between the New Jersey Devils and the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Lightning leading that series by a score of 3-1. And the news is that Sami Vatanen, after getting absolutely walloped by Nikita Kucherov in game number 4, will miss this game, which is a huge, huge loss for the New Jersey Devils. What did you think of the fact that Kucherov was not suspended for the hit?
Yeah, I really didn't think he was going to be suspended, just because when you look at the hit itself, the main point of contact appeared to be Vatanen's left shoulder, and just the drive and the force of the hit kind of brought more of Kucherov's right shoulder into the head area. But the main point of contact did appear to be the left shoulder in that hit. So from my angle, John Cooper, he thought it was he called it a good hockey hit after the game. Kucherov said there was no ill intention there. He just saw a player with the puck and was trying to separate him from the puck. And I think the Department of Player Safety did a good job of explaining why that hit wasn't suspensionable, whereas the hit that Drew Doughty had for the Kings was worthy of a suspension.
It's been fascinating to sort of see the Department of Player Safety and the way that they've handled things so far in the first round of the playoffs. I guess I think I thought that he was going to get suspended, and I guess this was just because of what had happened before, and the fact that we saw the 3-gamer for Kadri and a couple of other significant suspensions. But on the other hand, I do understand the explanation, and I'm certainly not outraged by it by any stretch of the imagination. Kucherov, meanwhile, he didn't just make a difference in terms of his physicality in that game, also scored 2 goals. This guy is unbelievable, and he really does seem to sort of, as much as a guy who was the leading scorer in the NHL for much of the regular season, he finds another gear in the playoffs, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he's another guy that was right there with the rest of the Lightning team, that towards the middle of the season and in the end of the season, it really didn't look like he was playing his best hockey, and was maybe just kind of going through the motions a little bit. He got off to a really hot start. He and Steven Stamkos were really the leaders for the Lightning through the first 2-3 months of the season, and Kucherov kind of carried that through to hold that scoring lead through much of the regular season until maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks, where he was finally overtaken by Connor McDavid. But I think that game and Game 4 was probably his best game of the season, regular season included, and not just the hit that he laid on Vatanen, but he was engaged in that game right from the start. He was back checking. He was playing really good defense, which, if you've watched Nikita Kucherov this year, he's not going to come up in too many Selke conversations. He's not that type of player. He's looking to make he's looking to break out early. He's that guy that's looking to go out on the breakaway. And he's not really the most responsible player defensively, but in Game 4, he was maybe one of the best defensive forwards for the Lightning in that game. And then what he was able to do offensively as well, the way he was able to set up that first goal for JT Miller, which was a really big goal for the Lightning, because they had given up that 5-on-3 goal early in the game. Had New Jersey been able to get a second goal without the Lightning answering, that could have been a different outcome in Game 4. But I think the fact the Lightning were able to respond so quickly after that opening goal, mostly set up by Nikita Kucherov, that was a big goal for them. And then he did another really good job of just kind of posting up in the slot on the game winner and out-muscling his marker to get a shot off and past Corey Schneider. And I think if you ask around the Lightning locker room, they'll tell you that was as good as Nikita Kucherov has played during his time here with the Lightning.
Wow, and that's saying something. I mean, that guy's a hell of a player, and that was sort of a beast mode performance. You mentioned him and Stamkos as running mates. JT Miller's got to be pretty happy that he's the guy who is riding along with Stamkos and Kucherov, shouldn't he?
Yeah, I mean, and you look at, Vladislav Nemesnikov at the beginning of the year, he was the left wing on that top line, and he was reaping the benefits of being with those two guys, and was up there amongst the scoring leaders on the Lightning as a result of being on that line. And JT Miller, he comes over in the trade where Nemesnikov gets shipped over to the New York Rangers. And I would venture to say JT Miller's had even more success than Nemesnikov did at the beginning of this season. He was a point per game producer over the final 19 games of the regular season while he was with the Lightning. And he really just provides the Lightning forward group a little something different that they don't have a lot of. They have a lot of the smaller, undersized, speed, skill guys like Tyler Johnson and Braden Point and Yanni Gordon, his emergence this year, but they don't have too many of the bigger, stronger power forward types. And JT Miller gives that to them. He's a bigger guy that can win some of those puck battles. He's a little bit gritty in the way that he plays on that first line. And he also is a really good he's really good in the left face-off circle, which was kind of a problem for the Lightning earlier this year. They were getting beat pretty routinely in the face-off dot. I think they were like 27th by the end of the regular season for face-off wins. And he's really helped them. They've stepped it up in the postseason. They've been one of the better face-off teams this year. JT Miller's a big part of that, as well as Anthony Cirelli, who came up from Syracuse. And Steven Stamkos has been really good since about February. He's been up about 60%. But JT Miller really just kind of complements those other two players extremely well and has really benefited from his time here in Tampa Bay.
How about Ryan McDonagh, the other guy who came along in that deal? How's he been so far?
Yeah, it's interesting. That deal, so much was made of it because the Lightning were looking for blue line help, and everybody saw McDonagh as the centerpiece and that guy that was maybe going to put them over the top. And then he was injured when he first came to Tampa Bay, so it took Lightning fans a while before they got to see their first taste of him. And then JT Miller just had such a great start to his season with Tampa Bay that you almost forgot about Ryan McDonagh and what the Lightning were able to add in him. But his value has really showed here, I think, in the postseason. He's just been a really steadying influence for that blue line. He's third amongst defensemen in time on ice right now for the Lightning. He has a couple of assists. I think he has 3 assists on the playoffs so far, more than any other Lightning defenseman. The way he's able to break the puck out of the zone has been a big boost for the Lightning. And also what he does on the penalty kill. I think it can't really go under-recognized how good the Lightning penalty kill has been in this series so far, when that was another sore spot for the team coming into the playoffs. They were one of the worst teams on the PK of the playoff teams, and now they've been one of the better teams in the playoffs. And a lot of that has to do with guys like Ryan McDonagh and Dan Girardi and some of these former Rangers that are willing to sell out and block shots and just be disruptive on that PK, and they've really done a good job of that so far in this series.
We're talking to Brian Burns of TampaBayLightning.com. The Lightning back in action. Puck will be dropping right about an hour from now as they look to finish off the New Jersey Devils in Game 5 of that series. And it wouldn't be the playoffs if Alex Killorn wasn't scoring big goals for this team and earning that hefty contract that he got a couple of years ago, would it?
Yeah, absolutely. He's been, he's just one of those guys that it seems whenever the postseason comes around, that's when the light bulb clicks on for him, and he goes off on a tear. If you remember a couple of years ago in the Stanley Cup final, he had that unbelievable goal against Chicago to open that series where he had his back to goal and was able to deflect the puck between his legs, bounce it off the ground out of the air, and put it past Crawford for the first goal of that series. And he just really steps up in the postseason. He's been really big on the power play for the Lightning so far in this series. 2 of his 4 goals have come with the man advantage, and he does a really good job of just kind of hanging around in the slot there. And you've got Kucherov in the right circle, and you've got Stamkos in the left circle, and Hedman's running the point, and everybody's kind of paying attention to those guys. And Alex Killorn just kind of lurks around in that slot, and whenever they can get him the puck, especially Kucherov, he's done a really good job of having the vision to find some of those open guys on the power play so far in this series. And Alex Killorn's been a big beneficiary of that. So has JT Miller. He's had a couple on the back post that Kucherov's been able to lace over to him.
Brian, thank you for your time. We really do appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks, Connor. Have a good one.
That's Brian Burns. This is Hockey Prime Time, and we're going to be back right after this. So we're talking to Jesse Granger. Let's get a Vegas perspective on what's gone wrong with that team. gone wrong. What am I saying? Everything's going right for that team. We will try to explain that next. Thank you, and we'll be back right after this. Yeah, the magic continues. The Vegas Golden Knights are through. They'll face the San Jose Sharks in the second round of the playoffs. Crazy that we could still have a couple of days worth of first round, and those teams have been through for a while now. I wonder if anybody did, and I'd be fascinated to know if somebody made a bet at the beginning of the season. I mean, it is Vegas, after all, made a bet that the Vegas Golden Knights would win the division, and what kind of odds you would have gotten on a bet like that.
There's got to be somebody. I mean, it can't not be. First of all, it's Vegas. Second of all, I mean, there's so many people that make these like crazy outlandish bets, and once in a while, I remember a story about an LA Kings fan who at the beginning of the season there was no hope, and they ended up. Remember when they won the cup after like coming in, I think 8th in the conference.
Yeah.
He had like put down something ridiculous, like a small amount of money, and then ended up winning something like $36,000 on it.
Wow.
It was and I mean it's Vegas. You kind of have to, and I would have like if I
really
yeah.
Why?
Not?
Because you would have. I'm sorry.
You would have been throwing money. I know. No, I know. But I would not have put like $100 down. I would have put like $10 down. I mean,
$10.
Yeah, not a lot.
At the time, it would have seemed as logical as setting a $10 bill on fire, though. Like nobody saw this coming.
No way. But you know what I mean. Like sometimes it's something crazy that you're like, I would have put the same amount of money down on the Habs. I knew they weren't.
Jesse's on the line.
Really, the Habs. I thought they were coming off a 103-point season. They won their division a year ago.
Right. I mean, we thought they would make the playoffs, but never win. I don't think I would have thought that they would have won.
I thought that they could contend for. I didn't think they'd win the Stanley Cup, but I thought they could contend for the division. They got Carey Price.
Right.
Usually that is good enough for 100 points. It just wasn't the case this year. But Vegas is just so amazing. You think of Leicester City. If you're a fan of soccer, Leicester City kind of came out of nowhere and won the Premier League a couple of years ago, which is kind of like what Vegas did. But the thing that makes it so much crazier is that they've now already swept a playoff series, which is something else entirely. It's one thing to win your division. It's another to win a playoff series, let alone sweep an opponent like the LA Kings, who idiots like me picked to win the series. They scored 3 goals, the Kings, in the series. With more on this amazing story out of Las Vegas, from the Las Vegas Sun, covering the Vegas Golden Knights. A pleasure to welcome back to the show, Jesse Granger. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for making time for us here. So the Knights back on the ice now, right?
Yep. Yeah, they literally just got off the ice from practice. I'm over here at the rink right now. They're in the locker room talking with us. But, yeah, long day of practice. They're being a little more physical, doing a little more scrimmage drills. Obviously, with this long break, you don't want to get too rusty before the games start back up.
And they've got an opponent that's in the exact same situation. It's got to be a huge advantage, I would think, for both teams. But it's one thing to sweep a team, Jesse, but another when it's a team that's as physical and known to be as sort of punishing as the Los Angeles Kings. It's got to be worth its weight in gold to get that series done as quickly as they did, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the NHL playoffs are going to be a grind, and by the time you get to June, if you're lucky enough to get there, you're probably going to be banged up. You're going to have guys injured. So right now, I just talked to George McPhee, General Manager George McPhee, a couple of days ago, and he said this is the healthiest this team has been in about 6 months, and could not be a better time of the year to have that, and it's something that most teams don't have. So to get through that first round, have a week or so off to get healthy and be as healthy as you possibly can going into this next round. I mean, it's a dream scenario for them.
The first expansion team in NHL history to sweep a series in their inaugural season, in which I think the Penguins had a sweep in their first playoffs appearance, but that was their third season in the National Hockey League. Just amazing stuff. And I love the quote from George McPhee. What did he say? No one knows what exactly is going to happen. We think we're a pretty good club, but we'll keep trying to do what we're doing and see where it takes us. And then he was asked about the downtime, and he said, this isn't like the bye week where we have 5 days off and they're not skating. We're not going to Mexico, says George McPhee. Well, not yet. Maybe once they win the Stanley Cup, they can do something like that. But no, this is remarkable. And what's a more impressive number, that they allowed only 3 goals in that 4-game sweep, or the fact that they managed to sweep a team while scoring only 7 goals?
Yeah, well, I mean, the goaltending was unbelievable. These games were 1-0, but they could have easily been 4-3. I mean, the Golden Knights were getting a lot of good chances on the Kings. Jonathan Quick just played out of his mind. He should have stole that series. The only problem was Fleury was playing just as good on the other side. I mean, the performance from Jonathan Quick over those 4 games is what you usually see in the playoffs, where a goalie just completely takes over and steals a series. Like I said, the only unfortunate thing is Fleury had one of the greatest historic series for a goaltender, giving up 3 goals, stopped 127 of 130 shots. I don't think the games were as low scoring as the score indicates. I think that the teams were getting plenty of chances. The goalies were just playing out of their minds.
You're right about that, and just a terrific goaltending battle. And now it's the San Jose Sharks, a different animal, and I think a much better team, and should be a very entertaining series. They've got a lot of speed on both sides there, and 2 very good hockey teams that are going to be going head to head whenever that does start. Jesse, they got to score more than 7 goals next round, right?
Yeah, I was actually just talking with Nate Schmidt about that, and it's funny because after the first 2 games here in Vegas against the Kings, he was saying, I mean, we're in Vegas. If I was a betting man, I would expect the scoring to go up because it's just, I mean, this team hadn't played a 1-goal game all year long, and then they have 2 against the Kings. So I was just joking with him in the locker room just now. I mean, you got to expect the series is going to be higher scoring, right? And he's like, yeah, well, that's what we said last time. So we'll see. Both these goalies are playing really good. Martin Jones obviously didn't face the onslaught that Fleury and Quick did in the first round, but Martin Jones played really well against Anaheim. But yeah, I expect a little more open ice. The Sharks have good defenders. Obviously, Brent Burns leads them, but they're not particularly responsible on the defensive end. They like to pinch, similar to the Golden Knights defenders. And it gives you kind of some open ice to work behind them. So we could see some much higher scoring games.
San Jose and the Vegas Golden Knights. Who'd have thought that 107-point regular season, and they carried that success over into the playoffs, sweeping the Los Angeles Kings, a team that won the Stanley Cup as recently as 3 years ago, out of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think that's another angle here, Jesse, is that this team in the Pacific Division, and we've seen the Oilers have been trying to do this. Oh, you got to be big, you got to be strong in the Pacific Division if you want to go toe-to-toe with the big boys like Anaheim and LA. The Golden Knights have really sort of flipped that narrative on its head, haven't they?
Yeah, Coach Gerard Gallant's done a really good job getting this team to play fast. They don't try to outdo the Kings with what they do, or the Sharks. They don't try to out-physical them, skate around them, and that worked in the regular season. They had a really good record. It's funny you say the Oilers, because the only team in the division that the Golden Knights really struggled with was the Oilers. They play that similar style of hockey, and this team has got a bunch of skaters. I mean, even the defensemen that aren't big players, they're kind of just role guys like John Merrill, guys like Nate Schmidt. They skate so well. And everyone on this team can skate, and they really like to get up and down. And it's going to be fun because the Kings obviously tried everything they possibly could do to stop that. The Sharks are going to skate with them a little more. It should be more fun. I think George McPhee kind of brought what he did in Washington over here, and obviously he doesn't have the studs like he did in Washington, but it's the same type of mentality as a hockey team.
And part of the story this year too was goaltending, and we did talk about Marc-Andre Fleury's terrific first round and an amazing season. It was remarkable that they kept winning games without Fleury at the beginning of the season, going down the depth chart, guy after guy after guy, and the fact that Fleury missed the time probably cost him a Vezina nomination in one of the best seasons that he's ever had. If you're looking at a team MVP for this season, is it as easy as just naming William Karlsson? So many standout performances. David Perron had 66 points. Eric Haula scored 29 goals. Just so many good performances. But is Karlsson the most valuable player on the team this year?
Well, I mean, the beauty of and the reason this team has had success is because it's so hard to name an MVP. And Karlsson's the easy one, but I'll tell you this: if you ask the players, if you were to take a poll from the Golden Knights, it would be Riley Smith.
Huh.
He is the glue that holds that top line together. Obviously, it was the best line in hockey with Karlsson, Marchessault, and Smith. And Marchessault and Karlsson get most of the accolades because they're the scorers, but Riley Smith is very responsible defensively. He allows those two to play freely in the offensive zone. He's one of the best passers on the team, if not the best passer. And he just kind of holds that line together. Late in the season when he was out, when he missed some time with an injury, that line was clearly not the same. So a guy that, I mean, obviously Karlsson and Fleury are the easy ones, but if you're looking for an off-the-radar guy as MVP, I think the players in the locker room think it's Riley Smith.
60 points in 67 games for Riley Smith, the pride of Etobicoke, if memory serves. That's where he's from. The best line in hockey. I do wonder if the David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, and Patrice Bergeron guys might disagree with you on that one, but hard to argue with the success that those guys had this year. Just an unbelievable story. Here's hoping it continues. I mean, Vegas, they're on board, right? I've seen the viewing parties outside. Like, it seems like Vegas really does sort of have Golden Knights fever, eh?
Yeah, I mean, first major pro team in the city's history, and they are loving every second of it. Like I said, I'm at the practice facility right now. It's cleared out now, but about 30 minutes ago, there were like 1,000 people here to watch the practice, and they were chanting "Go Knights, go!" and they were cheering them when they scored in practice. It's been pretty crazy.
It's amazing. So enjoy it, man. What a fun thing to be able to cover and to be able to see firsthand. So keep enjoying it, and thank you for making time for us here on your Saturday.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That's Jesse Granger for the Las Vegas Sun, the Vegas Golden Knights. So we'll begin. Do we have a date for the second round? I'm not sure. I guess we got to wait and see what happens in some of these other series. Is Nashville going to be able to finish off Colorado tomorrow night? If not, that one goes to 7 in Smashville, I believe, on Tuesday. We know that all the other Western teams are through. Should be pretty fun the next couple of days, even the next couple of hours. We got a game coming your way. Columbus, Washington is starting up at about 3 o'clock. We will have a live coverage of that for you right here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. Coming up next, let's talk Bruins. That is a pretty damn good line they've got, isn't it? I don't want to hear any more excuses from the Toronto Maple Leafs. That Nazem Kadri suspension, I thought it was a lot. But the fact that they weren't able to win that game with Patrice Bergeron in the lineup, out of the lineup, I should say, that is damning. And that's something I think that these guys are going to be looking back on for a long, long time. But we'll see, though. Coming up next, Ty Anderson from 98.5 The Sports Hub in Boston will join us. We'll go deep into the Bruins-Leafs series next on Hockey Primetime.
Two-on-one maybe. Pastrnak over the line, right side. Centers Marchand. He scores! Pastrnak raced into the right circle, fed it across to the near side. Anderson had committed, and Marchand fired it into an empty cage. 2-1 Bruins.
Yes, and they never looked back. What a pass from David Pastrnak. David Pastrnak? Pastrnak? No, are you sure? Do you call it pasta? Pastrnak. Let's get a definitive answer. Our next guest should know. He's covering the Boston Bruins in this series for 98.5 The Sports Hub in Boston. His name is Ty Anderson. Hello, good afternoon. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going? And for the record, it's Pastrnak.
It is.
For whatever reason.
Okay. All right. So there you go. We have settled this definitively, and I will try now to stop calling him Pastrnak, which is definitely, I now have like a muscle memory thing there that's going to be hard to overcome. When you heard the news, and when Bruins fans heard the news that Patrice Bergeron was somewhat shockingly not going to be playing in Game 4, I mean, you must have thought that the Bruins were in trouble, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. I think you look at sort of what he's been able to do in this series and this season, and you thought, okay, well, now you're coming back to Boston tied 2-2, and Kadri's coming back. So what are you going to do here now? I thought that was sort of going to be a massive blow for this team. But again and again, they seem to step up, regardless of who's in or out, that night's lineup gets the job done. And Riley Nash jumps right back in. They're able to squeak out a huge win for this series, no doubt.
And that's the thing. It's just such a big moment. And the fact, I do wonder if the Leafs, maybe they're part of the Leafs thing was wow, Bergeron's not playing. We got this. And what did it take? 30 seconds before they were down in that game. And another big storyline was, Ty, when the game was tied, and it was tied for a long time there at 1-1, was Tuukka Rask really sort of holding the fort, weathering the storm, whatever analogy you want to use. I mean, that was a massive performance from Rask, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been waiting for that moment, right, for Rask to steal a game. And I think Game 4 was that game. The Matthews line, they dominated possession. They had ice time. They had their chances. They didn't score. And I think it comes back to Tuukka. I thought their defensive game was very mediocre at best that night. So I look at the goaltender and say, yeah, he came up with big stops. Finally, this was the game, right? You got Bruins fans that complain to no one that Tuukka doesn't steal games, Tuukka doesn't play well, yada, yada, yada. Game 4, he was probably vintage Tuukka. This was back to 2013 Tuukka, making big saves, slowing the game down when he needed to, just totally in command of everything that was going on that night.
And well, I guess he's still got a ways to go. I know that there's a lot of Bruins fans who just don't seem to buy what Tuukka Rask is selling, right? Would you say that's fair? I'm not in that market, and I'm sure you spend a lot of time interacting with fans online with varying degrees of pleasantness, but there seems to be a segment of Bruins fans that they just don't like this guy.
No, it's true. I mean, I think that they became so accustomed to sort of Tim Thomas pulling out these miracles, looking unbeatable. The 2011 year, the wire-to-wire, what was it, 940 save percentage, basically. I mean, that's just incredible, and that sort of became the expectation for Tuukka once he stepped in for Thomas. All right, you got to beat this guy, and that's not necessarily fair to Rask, I would say, honestly. Expecting any goaltender to be that good wire-to-wire is just insane, but I do think that he sort of spent his career here, the second half of his career, battling all those pundits, all those people who say he can't get it done. They look back to 2016 when he was sick on the final day of the season. They look back to the final moments of Game 6 against Chicago. They look back to 2010 against Philly. It's always been, yeah, well, he hasn't done this. This sort of is that make or break year for him where he can really shut everybody up for the final time, where if he can get this done and this team going a deep run on his back, everyone has to just embrace that this goalie is a real legit #1 ace in the NHL.
And he had big shoes to fill in Tim Thomas, who was so amazing, and what a great story he was throughout the course of his career, and that crowning achievement of that outstanding performance in the Stanley Cup final and throughout the course of the Stanley Cup playoffs all those years ago. That can be tough to sort of come in and be the heir apparent to a guy like that, which I'm sure has affected him as well. What about Patrice Bergeron? What's going on? What's the latest? Is he going to play tonight?
Yeah, it looks like it. All signs are that he's a go for tonight. He was a full participant this morning in the morning skate. Cassidy said after the game they anticipate that he will play. Bergeron himself said he's going to play. He just has to convince the doctors and the coaches to let him go. So it seems that they've crossed almost every bridge with this guy, and he should be in tonight. And that's a massive, massive addition for this team, given how good that line has been, especially in games 1 and 2 here at the Garden. What can they do against some favorable matchups here against Toronto? It is
remarkable, isn't it, how well the Bruins have played without Bergeron, considering the fact that I think he's probably their best player. And then they've what are they, 11-4 or something like that in games that he's missed this year?
Yeah, they were 12-5-2 in the regular season. Now they're 13-5-2, obviously, if you count Game 4. It's just weird to me, because I look at that record there, and they played a lot of those games also without David Krejci or without David Backes, without Chara. It hasn't just been Bergeron. So that's why it's been so remarkable, I think, in a lot of ways. It's impossible, right? You look at sort of the losses and you say, you can't win those games. But this team has managed to do that more often than not. And, for me, it just comes back to, I think, what Cassidy has done all year long. Bruce Cassidy has really he's put rookies in big spots, and he said, go get it done, because he thinks it's a big work in progress to this point, right? He thinks that if the rookies can handle, shouldering Bergeron's load in Game 45, that they're better equipped to do it in Game 4 of the Stanley Cup playoffs than they would be if they didn't experience something like that.
We're talking Boston Bruins, who play tonight at 8 o'clock and looking to finish off the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 5 of their best-of-7 series. That's the late game tonight. We got 2 games this afternoon, including coming up next year on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. You'll be able to hear live coverage of the Columbus Blue Jackets and Washington Capitals. That series tied up at 2-2, Game 5. Less than, about 30 minutes from now, the puck will be dropping. But sticking with the Bruins, who, as we mentioned, face the Leafs at 8 o'clock tonight. What's the story in your eyes, and having been close to this team this year, of this team that I think has defied even the most optimistic of estimates as far as what they were going to do this year? How is it? Why is it that they were able to do that?
I just think that the young kids stepping in and really sort of grabbing the bull by the horns here and producing off the bat. You look at Jake DeBrusk, he's really filled the need for them. They needed someone to be with Krejci on a full-time basis. You know, that revolving door of line mates was really starting to bother Krejci, I think, as a player and as a professional. He felt he couldn't get, any consistent sort of production going there with that revolving door. Danton Heinen has been a great, great bottom 6 player for this team. He's sort of his trajectory reminds me a little bit of Brad Marchand without the extracurriculars of the post-whistle scrums and everything like that. A guy who started out on the 4th line, was at times playing on your 1st and 2nd line. You can move him anywhere, and his game remains the same. He's a consistent sort of 3-zone talent. I think he's been a real sneaky addition for this team. Same thing for Matt Grzelcyk on the back end. Another guy who really plays to Cassidy's strengths in his system. He's an attack-first player, but he knows how to get back. He knows how to use his lack of size to his advantage in terms of breaking plays up at the other end. So I think when you have all these young players and they step right in and they're able to contribute, not feel the pressure of the moment, that they're tasked with, I think that really sort of speaks to what this team has been about this year. And they've had leaders and captains help them along the way as well. So it's just been the perfect mix of experience and youth this year, which I think you're seeing around the league. You sort of need to be a high-end team nowadays.
And you need a coach who knows how to manage all those guys, that mixture, right? And they really do seem to have that in Bruce Cassidy. How different are things now? And I know the roster is very different. I think this is the thing a lot of people forget when they're criticizing Claude Julien, who I know was very popular and was very successful as coach of the Bruins, but clearly the Bruins made the right move there based on what's happened since then. But how different are things under Cassidy than they were under Julien? And if you could elaborate on specifically how they're different.
Yeah, I would say there's just some more positive sort of energy around the team. I think that players now, when they screw up, they know why they screwed up and they know how. I think there was a little bit sort of players felt that they were left in the dark at times under Claude, right or wrong. Talking to players, they feel as if Cassidy has a direct line of communication. He's often very blunt. He doesn't mince. He doesn't sort of hold back when he criticizes the player, be it behind closed doors or in the media. But the players know where they stand. I think that's been a big thing. He talks to players. He communicates with them. He says, hey, how do you feel about playing this? How do you feel about this player playing with you? Things of that nature. I think towards the end, Claude was just trying to ice the best possible roster. And I think he kind of fell into some habits where he was trusting his guys a little bit too much and not giving some players maybe the chances that they felt they deserved or really wanted. I think that was a big thing. To your point, though, the rosters are different. I think you can't sort of sell that short, really, in a lot of ways. Last year, and I love Tim Schaller. He's a great guy, great player, great teammate. But he's not a second-line winger. Last year, Claude had him on a second line. Is that a Claude not trusting a guy, or is that the Bruins not having a guy ready for that sort of role, like a DeBrusk? That's sort of, you can, mix it up however you want. But I think that's a real factor. But I think that there's just a more positive energy, and guys know where they stand now. And that really makes a world of difference. Players know why they're sitting versus saying, hey, why am I not playing? I think that goes a long way in a team's mindset and how those players can perform the next time they're given a chance.
And meanwhile, I'm based here in Montreal, covering the Canadiens and talking about the Canadiens. It has been remarkable, and I think that I don't know how fair it is, but I think you got to be crazy not to look at what's happened to the Bruins since Claude Julien stopped being their coach, and look at the Canadiens and what's happened to the Canadiens since Claude Julien became the coach. I don't want to put everything on Julien, but it's been a catastrophe in Montreal, and it's been a remarkable success story, surpassed only by the Vegas story this year, really, when it comes to the great storylines in the National Hockey League. What do you make of that? The fact that the Canadians appear to have taken a deep dive under Julien. I realize it's not his fault that Carey Price couldn't stop a beach ball this season, but it is kind of an amazing coincidence, at least, isn't it?
No, I mean, it definitely is. I think I look back at the roster, right? The Canadiens roster, I look at that and I say, that's not a Julien roster. You know, that's really not something that he can work with, given the sort of the lack of center depth and you know, how their defense is sort of shaping up. I don't see that being a Claude team. So I thought it was a bad fit from the start, to be honest with you. I didn't see it being like, oh, Claude is going to come in there and dominate. Like, I always thought he had his work cut out for him. But it has been a free fall, right? I thought that the biggest thing that Claude was going to have was going to be Weber and Price. And this year, Weber, you know, was not Weber, and Price, like you mentioned, not what we've seen out of Carey Price before. So, you know, if the system doesn't play to those guys' strengths moving forward, that team's in trouble. You know, that team is absolutely in trouble. So, you know, it is a coincidence in a weird way, right? When you see the Bruins and they have all these players that are now playing, these young guys, and everyone's producing at career highs, you're saying, okay, what was happening before that? But I look at the Montreal roster this past year and I say, that's not a Claude team. So maybe they address that this offseason and they bring in some guys that are more to Claude's liking. But at the same time, is that where you want to go? Is that where the league is trending? I personally have my doubts there. So, you know, I wonder how it's going to shape up. But there's no doubt that Claude's message and his systems, obviously in Boston, hit a breaking point. I just wonder how long that will take in Montreal.
And I get what you're saying there. You look at the teams that missed the playoffs to begin with, or you can look at the teams that have been knocked out, and namely, I can look at the LA Kings and the way that they play, look at the Anaheim Ducks and Randy Carlyle as their coach. I wonder if Claude Julien may be sort of, if the game is this is going to sound really harsh, but like if the game is sort of passed him by, and if he needs to evolve, if he needs to adapt and be more like a Bruce Cassidy, more like a Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh, these guys that are preaching offense first, not defense first, and really sort of a more forward thinking brand of hockey. Is that too harsh when it comes to Julien, or do you think that's fair?
No, I think it's a real thing. I mean, if I were Claude, I would have taken a year off and sort of figured out what went wrong with my systems. What were the mistakes that were being made, and how can I adjust? I look at Tortorella, right? I think that John Tortorella has done a great job since taking that year off and coming back to the NHL. I think you almost need that. You know, to your point, Mike Sullivan, a guy who put in work in the AHL, you know, and even Cassidy put work in the AHL. They figured out what went wrong the last time around and how they could fix it the next time. I think that's a real thing that some of these coaches need to do. But we know how the game is, right? They're so eager to get back involved that they'll take the first job offer that's there. And I think for Claude, that may have been a mistake. You know, we'll see next year. We'll see what they look like. But ultimately, I thought that a year off would have done that guy wonders. He still would have had the pick of the litter in terms of jobs. He could have had a better opportunity maybe somewhere else. But I do wonder if jumping right in kind of hurt him and didn't give him the chance to see some of the flaws that were in the Bruins game last year and in his system and how to adapt there. And, you know, you talk to the Bruins players, they'll tell you some of the simple tweaks that they made under Cassidy versus Claude. And it makes a world of difference just watching the teams play on the ice, such as D-to-D passes now. They don't go D-to-D. They look for a guy up the ice. And you watch the Bruins, you see that constantly.
Well, yeah, you know what? This is very enjoyable. Thank you for making time. Sorry for doing the deep dive on Claude Julien. I'm sure that you weren't necessarily expecting that. And thanks a lot. Enjoy that game tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That's Ty Anderson at 98.5 The Sports Hub, covering the Boston Bruins. Not a bad time to be a Bostonian. Geez, they've got an embarrassment of sports riches right now. The Bruins are in the playoffs, about to knock off the Leafs, or at least that's what it looks like. The Red Sox are off to the greatest start in franchise history, and from what I'm hearing, getting a lot of the attention. The Celtics are in the playoffs, have a pretty decent team in what appears to be a wide-open Eastern Conference. Well, what am I forgetting? Oh, maybe the Patriots looking to draft a quarterback at the NFL draft next weekend? Or is Tom Brady just going to play forever? I don't know, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit envious of sports fans in Boston. And this is a lovely, lovely time of year in that city. Oh, walking through Boston Common in the springtime. going to a ball game at Fenway Park on a day like this. You could do worse. Coming up next, we'll tee up the games that are coming up. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Capitals, finally, they won one, and it's you weren't biting your nails if you were a Caps fan. What did they do? They blew the lead, and they scored first, and they have scored first in every game in this series. They blew 2-0 leads in the first two. Then they almost blew a 2-0 lead in the next one, but the goal was disallowed that would have given them a 2-0 lead. Anyway, they're back on track, and what a crazy story that is. Little Hall & Oates in the background, eh? Takes me back if you are into video games. And if not, you're wasting your life. Grand Theft Auto Vice City is this song. That's where I first learned of the existence of Hall & Oates, who I saw live in concert last summer. And they're touring apparently again this summer. Might be worth checking that out if you're into live music. My name's Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. So, did you see David Puddy or Patrick Warburton from Seinfeld, right? I'm sure you know who Puddy is from Seinfeld. Elaine's on-again, off-again boyfriend during what I think is the best period of that show, and that's really saying something. Puddy famously, he was a big Devils fan, right? The face-painted Devils fan, a character on Seinfeld, and then they brought him out. The Devils were pulling out all the stops the other night, and be curious to know how much they paid him to do that. But he showed up to fire up the fans at the beginning of the game, face painted and everything. And it didn't work out, right? It just didn't work out for the.
Maybe he's bad luck.
I don't think he's. I'm not going to put this on Puddy. But what I am wondering
2 minutes
is what are the Tampa Bay Lightning do? How do you counter that if you're the Tampa Bay Lightning? The game is starting up very soon, so mere moments from now at Amalie Arena. who is the celebrity Tampa Bay Lightning fan? And I'm going to give you the answer. It's not good, guys. I'm sorry. That you've got Aaron Andrews. You know Aaron Andrews, the very well-known, I think, Fox Sports reporter. And the other guy is Dick Vitale, the famous basketball commentator. Oh, baby. No, wait, that's Bob Cole. Anyway, Dick Vitale. He's American Bob Cole. So those are your two guys. I don't know if those people have what it takes. With all due respect to Aaron Andrews and Dick Vitale, I don't know if they have what it takes to get the crowd fired up. But the other thing is I'm not convinced that the Lightning or their fans are going to need any help. They're going to be fired up. And you saw it happen last night. It's opportunities squandered. Nashville and Winnipeg are perfect examples of this. Both had opportunities to finish off their opponents at home in Game 5. Winnipeg took the bull by the horns, got the job done. Nashville were not able to beat Andrew Hammond, of all people, and ended up in a situation where they now have to go to Denver and play another game. And we'll see what happens there. But they're going to want to emulate those Jets to get the job done early. I think Hulk Hogan was a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, but he's kind of fallen out of favor with pretty much everybody in the last couple of years, except for maybe Bubba the Love Sponge. I may be still friends with him.
Oh my.
All right. Thank you, Laura Saba. Thank you to Jesse Ralph, our technical producer at SiriusXM. Our executive producer is Sam Wu. I'm Conor McKenna. And coming up next, enjoy the game. We got the Washington Capitals and the Columbus Blue Jackets. Game number 5. Should be a good one. So that is right around the corner. And on behalf of everybody involved here, can't wait to talk to you again next week.
Perfect. Thank you.